Hello and welcome to the Anorak Review Show with your host, the Anorak. The 90s have been something of an interesting time and period for rock music, if not music as a whole. We've had the grunge scene with Nirvana, the rising of hip-hop and rap music, and of course, the battle of Britpop between Oasis and Blur. Now, the band Blur in particular have had this share of fans and deriders. Some have considered them a classic example of British rock music, while others derided them as just dismissive, snobby, middle class working people. But let's not forget that Blur have left an impact, specifically its founder, Damon Albarn, who of course would go on to find and create Gorillaz alongside Jamie Hewlett. As for Blur, many people will know them for the mid-90s albums with Parklife, The Great Escape, and Modern Life is Rubbish, and even some of the later, more alternative tracks like Song 2 from the titular album. But it seems that not many people seem to give attention to their more earlier roots, and by that I mean their debut album, which I'll be looking at today. So, does this early album hold up? Despite having some subtle differences, it still lays some foundations to their later music. Regardless, let's take a listen to Blur's Leisure and see if it holds up after nearly 30 odd years later.
Beginning the album is She's So High, not only the first track of the album, but probably the first single of Blur. And for a first song, it kind of gives off a good idea of what Blur would be like over the coming years. But at the same time, it kind of shows them at their early roots, of course, being their first song. It has this kind of shoegaze kind of style to the music, with Graham Coxon's guitars and the drums and percussion as well. The lyrics themselves are very minimalistic. A lot of recurring phrases revolving around a particular theme about Damon's yearning and unrequited love for a particular person, going on how she's so high, possibly referring to her being high on drugs or ecstasy or something, which were kind of a thing back even by the end of the 80s and the dawn of the 90s. And how no matter how much he tries to connect with her, she just seems so blissfully ignorant of his presence, almost as if he feels kind of unaccomplished or something. And I can imagine why this was kind of part of a passing phase at the time. This was at the very when this song first came out. It was at October of 1990, and at that time, a lot of the 80s music, like the Manchester, the shoegaze, and like the new wave and all that, were kind of starting to kind of phase out popularity, and we were still kind of transitioning to what music we would be used to by the new decade. So this does does fit with that kind of awkward transition between the old and the new. But still, it gives off a good first impression of the band, and it gives a good hint of what kind of music they would tackle into for what would come. We have Damon's very youthful very youthful vocals. We still have the guitars and the percussion and even a bit of the bass, and you have a very simple and very simplistic piece. It's not trying to be anything too deep or too complex. It just takes an idea and just sticks with it and goes along with it. Next is Bang, another song that kind of fits into that kind of grungy shoegazing kind of style, and its lyrics seem to be kind of a comment on the more mundane life of England, if not Britain as a whole, similar to what they would do with albums like Parklife and Modern Life is Rubbish. in it, Damon kind of laments about how he sits in the underground tubes waiting for the trains to rumble by, comparing it to an SDT or a sensory deprivation tank, as if he's kind of so used to the dullness and the emptiness and boredom of his life that all of his senses have just gone numbed and all kind of cancelled out. And in the chorus we get the lines of "I don't need anyone, but a little of your love can make things better." Kind of going into that kind of going back to that feeling of yearning for a relationship or commitment to make him feel more useful, more present, more kind of have more of a purpose in life. And and apparently this song was kind of detested and despised by the members of Blur themselves, admitting that it was written within like 15 minutes. And I can understand why they have such feelings. They said that it was just an attempt from the companies to have them kind of cash in on a popular music style, but as someone who came in late and not had to judge it by then, I still kind of enjoy this kind of song regardless. It's a product of its time, but still a very decent and underrated product of its time. It still conveys the kind of emotions that Damon and crew often try to convey in a lot of Blur songs. Then we have Slow Down. Slightly more faster paced compared to the previous two songs. This one has some more chunkier, slightly more distorted guitars to this one. And its lyrics seem to sing about how Damon's warning this person to just slow down and not live life so fast with all the thrills that it may offer. And how all the time they spent together with all the things he has said, he didn't really mean as genuine, as if he's not trying to be too close to this person, as if they're living this dangerous, thrill-seeking life that Damon isn't exactly finding ideal. And it's still kind of interesting, even though it might contradict the feeling of yearning that the previous songs have kind of conveyed and gave off. It's still interesting to give off a slightly different point of view and a different idea to a song from the album. And Coxon's guitars in this case are are probably heavy even by Blur standards, at least in the early days standards. It's another song that I think could have been a good single off the album had this album been a bit more loved, a bit more of a hit. But as is, this song is pretty fine. It's a good pace, it's good lyrics, it's all around simple, straight and to the point. And just for a song called Slow Down, it is anything but slow. Repetition, on the other hand, is much slower compared to the other songs. This is one where the instruments of Graham Coxon's guitars, James's bass, and Dave Roundtree's percussion really kind of take over. Not that the vocals and the lyrics are kind of drowned out, just that, as already minimalistic as they are, and the surprisingly long length of this particular song at about 5 minutes and like 20-ish seconds, this is one where the instruments kind of take most of the spotlight, while some of the lyrics kind of add as kind of the role of the sort of tent pole of the songs. Here, Damon kind of sings about how one keeps going through life and carrying on and asks why to keep trying again. As the old saying goes, if at first you don't succeed, keep trying and trying and trying. But Damon here kind of asked, what's even the point? What's even trying anymore if you're just going to get the same result over and over? This continues on that feeling of mundaneness and tiresomeness that something like Bang kind of did before, but while kind of adding to that kind of theme. The song even name drops the previous track Slowed Down by its exact title, kind of adding and continuing that themes of slowing down and just realizing what's right in front of you, what's all around you right now, and kind of realizing the futility of life itself. And here, cosmic guitars really go back and forth really well between being deep and distorted and chunky to being almost screechy and kind of as the song would say, very repetitious, kind of adding to the theme of cycling over and over. And I think that's actually kind of clever how a single loop can add to the theme of repetition. And I think even if they didn't mean it to be deep, you can still read a lot into such few lyrics, and even how the music complements the lyrical themes and contents of each song, and as well as the album as a whole. The last thing I want to mention about repetition is that with Damon's vocals, they seem to have this kind of weird filter to them, as if he's kind of speaking through like a weird like megaphone, like a foghorn or something, in between the microphones, as if he's trying to call out to through a radio or through like some kind of special microphone or something. There's not really much to it. It's just this. I just thought it was an interesting filter that kind of made the vocals stick out in this song compared to the other songs of the album. Next we have Bad Day. This one begins with a very interesting instrument. What may sound like a harmonica to many may actually kind of be a melodica of sorts, presumably played by Damon himself. Yeah, 10 years before Gorillaz, Damon was actually using the melodica this early. Go figure. Well, anyways, this starts off the song until it develops into a very 60s kind of heavy rock kind of track with tambourines and a kind of groovy instrument by Coxon, and about half a minute in, the melodica kind of disappears entirely, which is kind of a shame. I would have liked to hear more of that melodica for the rest of the song, if not for most of the songs in this album. But I think in that respect, this one kind of sticks out to me in particular because of the use of that instrument and how it would foreshadow the songs such as Clint Eastwood and Tomorrow Comes a Day, other Damon Albarn songs that use that instrument. But anyways, much like the rest of the songs of this album, the lyrics here are very minimalistic and use a lot of reoccurring phrases, like how this person that Damon sings about doesn't really know how to feel, and therefore Damon himself doesn't know how to feel, therefore what is otherwise could be a fun day, judging by the otherwise happy toned music, is suddenly a bad day. And it it kind of shows how emotions can easily spread to other people. If one one person feels happy, another person can feel happy. If they feel sad or upset, another would feel upset or sad. It's kind of like a domino effect of emotional reactions and responses. I'm not exactly a doctor of psychology, but anyone out there watching this may find something interesting here to listen to and kind of read deep into and interpret all that. What she feels bad all about is kind of up for debate. Is this person that Demon's saying about kind of lying to him about her feelings, or is this like the one time she's kind of spoken her honest truth, or maybe this is the only lie that she has to kind of hide her inner emotions and kind of things that we don't find the most proud of or kind of feel the most satisfied about, something that we kind of feel a bit embarrassed or humiliated by. It's up to interpretation, which I think is pretty interesting. And the way it ends is how it is when it fades out with the kind of weird, distorted, if not reversed sounding guitars, giving it a kind of dazing kind kind of knockout feel to it. Well, anyway, that leads us to the next track, simply called Sing. And this is without any doubt the longest track of the album. Probably the longest song Blur have ever made, clocking at exactly 6 minutes. And for a song that lasts that long, there's probably even less lyrics here than even any of the other songs. The way it begins is this jolting kind of rhythmic piano playing, and it kind of revels, or rather unrevels, into this kind of euphoric, almost neo-prog kind of rock song. And Damon kind of sings these very simple lyrics like, if the child in your head is dead, and all the other vague stuff, along with these harmonic vocals just going ha ha ha. And it's both kind of uplifting and both kind of downbringing at the same time. From this, it kind of goes into how one can easily and eventually lose their innocence, their childhood. The inner child in their head will eventually die out. And when he says "sing to me," it seems to refer to a particular song that we kind of grew up listening to, and when we tell it to sing, we just kind of play it. We kind of listen to it. We hear all those old musicians and artists and singers sing for us. And that's kind of representing the feeling of nostalgia and how good it can feel, but how inevitably it can remind us how so much had changed, whether it be for the better or for the worse. In some cases, both ways. Nostalgia isn't always a bad thing, either. It can be a good thing, but sometimes it can be a bit too unhealthy, and if we obsess too much of it, reality will come hard to the face. And boy, is this a beautiful song. It's a very underrated song too. For all the kind of backlash from the creators themselves, I think this one kind of deserved a better chance. And bear in mind, this was probably one of the earliest songs Blur have ever made as a band, as early as like 1988 or 89, and that kind of ambition has to impress me, and I honestly am. I kind of wish Blur would play this song more often in their gigs and tours, and I kind of wish someone like Damon would kind of give him more of a chance and more of a kind of appreciation for it. After all, fans like me have, so hopefully the band themselves will learn to appreciate that too. Digging further into the lyrics, Damon seems to sing about how he can't feel because he's numb. Obviously following up on the previous song Bad Day, and how this person kind of says how much they can't feel much. Similar to how kind of something like Slow Down and Reputation has something of a connected theme to them, this and Bad Day seems to connect about the idea of feelings. And in it, Damon also kind of sings about how, what's the worth of all this? Like, what is the point of living out our nostalgic pasts when eventually it'll all fade away and we'll all kind of pass away with it? It has this kind of pessimism to it, without going all emo about it. And I gotta commemorate bands like Blur to tackle something like that. Be all emotional without being emo.